There's a plant growing at the edge of the sea right now. It is growing where nothing is supposed to grow, in sand, in salt, in the tides in reach. It asks nothing of you. It requires no soil amendment, no irrigation channel, no bag of synthetic nitrogen. It has been eating light and sea wind since before the first furrow was ever cut into European earth. People ate it for thousands of years. It saved them during the worst hunger this continent ever knew. And then, in the span of roughly a century, it was reclassified. Not as food, not even as a plant of interest. It became, in the language of agricultural management, a weed. The question is not why it survived without us. The question is why we stopped surviving with it. If you are new here, this channel exists to hold what has been let go, not with nostalgia, not with ideology, but with the understanding that when a food disappears from the human memory, something more than a recipe is lost, a way of reading the land is lost, a relationship between a people and a place is severed at the root. We are ancient food files, and what we do here is open the archive. If this matters to you, if you believe that forgotten knowledge is still knowledge, consider subscribing, not for the numbers, but because the more of us who holds this record, the harder it becomes to erase again. Now, let us go back, not to a garden, to a shoreline. The plant is called kikil. In English, it carries the name sea rocket. The genus is old, older than most of the names we have given it. In the coastal communities of Ireland, it was known simply as Lus na Tra, the herb of the strand. Along the Atlantic shores of Morocco and Portugal, it grew without a formal name at all, because plants that everyone uses rarely need one. It was simply there. It was simply eaten. The two species most important to the human story are Kikil maritima, native to the Atlantic and Mediterranean coasts of Europe and North Africa, and Kikil edentula, native to the eastern seaboard of North America. They are members of the mustard family, Brassicaceae, which already tells you something. The family that gave the world cabbage and kale and watercress and horseradish, a lineage of survivors. Sea rocket grows in the strand line, the exact margin where the tide's last reach deposits wrack and shell and driftwood. The sand there is not soil in any agricultural sense. It is loose, shifting, saltwater laced, and almost entirely without the nutrients that conventional farming demands. And yet, sea rocket not only tolerates this environment, it has made it its entire kingdom. The leaves are fleshy, succulent almost, a deep blue-green that suggests concentration, the storing of something the plant does not intend to waste. The flowers are small, four-petaled, lavender to pale white, arranged in tight terminal clusters. They bloom from late spring through early autumn. The seed pods are jointed, a remarkable design, two-chambered, the upper chamber detaching when ripe and drifting on water, sometimes for months, before germinating on a distant shore. The lower chamber stays anchored to the parent plant, ensuring local succession even when the seeds scatter across an ocean. The plant is simultaneously sedentary and migratory, rooted and sailing. So where did it go? Not from the shoreline. Sea rocket still grows there in abundance on coasts across multiple continents. It did not go anywhere. We did. The erasure of sea rocket from the human diet is not the story of a plant that failed. It is the story of a food system that required failure in very specific ways. The consolidation of European agriculture across the 18th and 19th centuries demanded uniformity. Crops that could be planted in rows, harvested by machines, stored in warehouses, transported by rail, sold by weight, taxed, tithed, and controlled. Sea rocket offered none of this. It grew where it chose to grow. It fruited on its own schedule. Its harvest window was narrow and labor-intensive, handfuls gathered from the strand rather than wagon loads from a field. It could not be owned. It could not be enclosed. The Enclosure Acts, which privatized common land across Britain between the 16th and 19th centuries, did not technically extend to the tideline. But the culture they created, the culture of property, of agricultural improvement, of rational land management, reached the shore in other ways. Coastal gathering became associated with poverty, with backwardness, with the life of people who had no better option. After the famine in Ireland, this association hardened into something generational. The foods eaten in the worst years became markers of the worst years. Parents who had survived on seaweed and shore plants raised children who were determined never to touch them again. This was not ignorance. This was the logic of trauma. You do not serve your children the food of starvation if you can serve them something else. The forgetting was rational and thorough. The quiet rediscovery has been underway for several decades now, largely outside of public attention. In 2008, researchers at the University of Cadiz in Spain published an analysis of Cajil maritima, identifying significant concentrations of vitamin C, calcium, and glucosinolates in the fresh leaves, confirming what coastal communities already knew across centuries of use. In 2015, studies examining halophytic plants as candidates for saline agriculture gave sea rocket renewed attention as a model species for understanding salt tolerance at the molecular level. More recently, soil ecologists studying pioneer vegetation on degraded coastal dunes have documented the role of Cajil species in initiating soil formation on bare sand, the first chapter of a successional story that can end, over decades, in stable vegetated dune systems. The plant does not merely survive the margin, it transforms it. What science is confirming, carefully and slowly, is the outline of a knowledge system that functioned without peer review for thousands of years. The modern food system is built on the assumption of stability, stable climate, stable supply chains, stable commodity prices, stable rainfall patterns in the agricultural belts that feed the largest cities on Earth. That assumption is under pressure from every direction simultaneously. Saltwater intrusion into coastal farmland is documented in Bangladesh, Vietnam, the Nile Delta, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta in California. Topsoil depletion continues at rates that agricultural scientists describe, in unguarded moments, as catastrophic. The consolidation of global grain supply into a handful of crops, primarily wheat, rice, and maize, creates a fragility that has no historical precedent in scale. Sea rocket grows in the places that are already going wrong. It grows in salt, in sand, in the margin that the system has abandoned. It does not require the conditions we are losing. It is already adapted to the conditions we are inheriting. This is not a coincidence. Millions of years of coastal evolution do not produce accidents. There is something strange about standing at the tideline and looking at a plant that was eaten during a famine, that was drawn in 12th century manuscripts, that was carried as living ballast in the hulls of migrating shorebirds, and recognizing that it has been here the entire time. Not waiting. Plants do not wait. They grow, they flower, they cast their two-chambered seeds into the water and let the current decide. The knowledge was never inside the plant. It was inside the people who knelt at the strand line and gathered with the sea left behind. When those people were shamed out of that knowledge, when poverty ate the memory of the shore, the plant kept growing, indifferent, patient, perennial. What we call a forgotten food is almost always a food that powerful systems found inconvenient, unownable, unmanageable, too tied to place, to season, to the knowledge of a particular people in a particular landscape. The industrial food system did not erase sea rocket from the shore, it erased it from the mind. The shore has not forgotten a thing. There is a generation of coastal foragers, botanists, and subsistence farmers who are kneeling at the strand line again, not out of nostalgia, out of calculation. The world they are preparing for requires a different kind of reading, one that does not begin with property or storage or the price of nitrogen fertilizer. It begins with the ability to look at a piece of apparently barren sand at the edge of the sea and know that you are not looking at nothing. You are looking at a garden. You always were. If this record matters to you, if the plants that built us deserve to be remembered, subscribe to Ancient Food Files. There is more in the archive. There is always more in the archive. And the more hands that hold it, the less it gets lost.